Good everyone, Shadow Wita here. Right, I know I still haven't done, well, technically I have done it, but I still haven't put up last week's PMQs. It is supposed to come out. I'm still having problems trying to get the video up for some fucking reason. But either way, we have, usually we have PMQs today. Now usually, and this is from the 14th of Ærra, or which would make it the 7th, I think, of December. 14th, yeah. Basically, I'm a week ahead of everyone. Those who use that, the calendar I use are a week ahead. Yeah. So, yeah. No, usually I was also going to say usually I go through. I prefer to go through either the LBC broadcast of it or the Sky News coverage. But I've heard that BBC's Politics Live coverage of it this week was actually pretty tasty. So I thought I'd give it a look. Again, if you don't know the format, yes, it's dark. Welcome to the Shadow Wartime. If you don't know the format, I don't show this. I don't show what's going on. I've got the volume up so everyone can hear what's going on. To date, I've not had copyright claims, so you hear everything what's going on, and then you get my response as well. My response is coming from either a pagan or a socialist, or sometimes a mix of both point of view. Sometimes it's not communist, by the way. On the scale, center, and I'm not on the extremes. So I'm not too far to the center, but I'm not too far to the left either. So yeah. So yeah, that's the format, and I have, as I said, I've heard this one was tasty. A couple of guys I follow have taken a look at this one. Maximilian Robespierre being one of them. Great dude, check him out. Definitely check him out. Subscribe to his channel. Sorry, Max, didn't mean to plug you. But yeah, here we go. BBC Politics Live Prime Minister's questions.
Joining me today, Conservative MP Vicky Ford, Scottish National Party MP Drew Hendry, Daily Mirror political editor John Stevens, and Times Radio's chief political commentator Lucy Fisher. Today,
if everyone in the public sector were to receive a pay rise in line with inflation, that would cost an extra £28 billion, an extra £1,000.
I won't go there yet.
Pounds per household.
Lives are being lost because we cannot staff the ambulance service and health service because the government has presided over a decade of real-term pay cuts.
'Tis the season to strike, but who's Scrooge? The government or the unions?
The government. They're screwing themselves. They're screwing themselves. The public, by and large, are on the side of the strikers because at this point, people know that the people who are striking are just like they are.
I don't think Michelle Mone should have been made appear in the first place, but I think what this exposes is there is something rotten at the heart of the Tory party.
Labour go on the attack over the Tory baroness embroiled in a row over lobbying for COVID contracts.
Britain is one of the most centralised systems in Europe, and the centre has not delivered.
Can Keir Starmer's devolution offer change minds in Scotland? And after U-turns on house building and wind farms to placate his own MPs, Rishi Sunak faces Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions. We'll bring you that live at noon. You heard there in the headlines, the Health Secretary and union boss over strike action. No resolution yet over the forthcoming action from the RMT, amongst others, over Christmas. So the question for the panel to start the programme is, who's winning the battle, Vicky, for hearts and minds?
So just to say at this point, we do have strikes going ahead over Geola, but my dad's going to be one of those. He's been working at Exodus and he's been working at Exodus and David since I was just before I was born, and I've been alive nearly 29 years. So,
Minds. Is it the government or striking workers?
I just think the whole thing is so sad. I'm an NHS doctor's wife. I absolutely understand how important those who work in public services are. But to come to these strikes and the impact that's going to have on other people. In my constituency in Chelmsford, I've got hundreds of kids who get on the trains every day to get in and out of school, and they're not going to be they're going to be struggling again. You'll have people who are desperate to get back to family for Christmas. We haven't had a Christmas for 3 years, and they're just not going to be able to get there because they're striking on.
So are you saying then the public is supporting the government on this?
So I think what the public are seeing is incredibly difficult economic times. We've got this global inflation caused by the Putin's war in.
how do I should have guessed that this twat was gonna fucking. Well, I'm married to an NHS doctor, so that gives me some legitimization on this, right? And he should tell you what. See, the thing is I've watched some doctors who are right-leaning come on shows and say how, well, we need to move to a privatised system. They're in the minority. They're like, and it's funny, the Tories have for the last few years have been all about, the majority opinion is what we need to listen to. But right now, all they want to care about is the minority opinions.
Ukraine, and the public get that if people are given unaffordable pay rises, you're just going to push inflation up and up and up even
That's not what's driving inflation.
more, and that makes everybody poorer. And people get that. When I'm on the doorsteps, they get that.
All right, who's winning, John, in this battle for hearts and minds?
I think the Tory government clearly miscalculated on this one. That at the beginning of this, when it was just the rail union, they were keen to ratchet this up. They thought this was something they could hit Keir Starmer over the head with. And now it's spread to all sorts of different industry, all different sectors. They've realised that there are millions of people now potentially being balloted to go on strikes. And this is a problem for them. And when people have problems, when they can't get an ambulance, when they can't get a train, they'll be blaming the ministers, thinking they haven't done enough to avert these strikes.
Vicky?
So I don't think that's a fair accusation because, obviously the unions need to be talking with the employers and the government needs to work to.
I'm sorry, but when it's public service, public service workers, I'm sorry, but the government is the boss. And I have a funny feeling we're going to hear about the independent pay review body today, and how we did the right thing, we just followed it. I'm sorry, but just because it's an independent doesn't mean you don't question it. Can you reevaluate given this circumstances? Like, it's a pathetic excuse, just constantly. Oh, we agreed to the independent pay review body. Yeah, right. Did you have any Did you give it any pushback? Probably not.
Facilitate those discussions, which they have done. But you've got, for example, the nurses, and God bless nurses, we need nurses, but asking for nearly 20% pay rise.
It's unaffordable.
It literally isn't. And it's such a fucking insult that this bitch can come on here and say, or like they can't be demanding this much. You cut pretty much that from their pay in the first place. They're asking for parity, bitch.
And it's completely unaffordable.
Okay.
And that inflation hits everybody.
Drew, there are strikes in Scotland, school strikes today and tomorrow. I understand you've got your own issues. Who's winning the battle there?
Well, I think people people who are on strike are people with families.
Yeah.
They're facing the same cost of living crisis that other people are facing as well. They've got the same worries about putting food in the...
To be fair, I don't have a good handle on what the SNP party's deal is with unions. I don't know what their history is with it.
The table about paying their bills. They're in the middle of an energy crisis, and Vicky and our colleagues love to try and blame all this on global factors, but let's face it,
Well, who do you blame for it?
they've created a lot of this inflation, in particular food price inflation, especially through Brexit.
So will you be paying teachers more? Will you be paying workers inflation-busting pay rises?
Well, the offers that are being made in Scotland are already higher than the offers that are being made in the rest of the UK. But of course, Scotland has a limited budget because of the devolution settlement. What we've said very clearly is we've said to the Chancellor should have been, for example, with the NHS doing an above-inflation increase so that we could pass that on to NHS workers. Nurses are already on average paid more in
Scotland. This guy sounds like he's falling on the side of they should be paid this. It sounds like.
Scotland and the rest of the UK, and they were given a higher pay offer than the rest of the UK. We'd like to do more, but of course we don't have borrowing powers, we don't have the financial powers, and that's why
you could make different choices.
Well,
you're limited, I know, in the way that you said, but you could make different choices. It's always easy to blame Westminster for not taking a decision yourself.
We could if we had the powers to do that, but they've been blocked time and time again, especially borrowing powers, which would have given us the flexibility to make the kind of choices that
we'll come on to more borrowing powers, as Labour is suggesting later on in the programme. Who's winning this battle?
Well, I don't think it's Rishi Sunak. I think those people, many people have sympathy, particularly.
Yeah. It's quite funny. When I first started watching this kind of thing, before I started recording it and stuff. Oh, and yes, I am eating. I haven't eaten all day, so I'm eating a couple of cookies. I'm sorry. Anyway, and yes, I recognise this also probably the problem for a reason why I haven't got shit teeth. Whatever. Anyway, before I started recording my reactions for this stuff, I was just watching this stuff. To begin with, you saw, like, there was a lot of attacks. When people on the panel, there was a bit of bias. I hadn't seen it on Question Time, I have to admit, but on other shows like this and on Sky and others, LBC, there was ordinarily there was centrists or centre-rightists and right-wingers with the odd centre-left, and very rarely and actually someone on the left. Nowadays, I'm seeing more of people from like Novara Media. Another good one. Go and fucking check them out and like and subscribe to their. They're a bit further left than I am on some things, but for the most part, I agree with them. So. And now we're seeing the majority, even if it's media, people from the media, they used to be like, oh, but what plan have Labour got? And but the Tories have got a massive majority and all this. Oh, and Brexit. Oh, and all this. But now we've got actually, even from the media, we get criticisms of Brexit. We get, the majority opinion seems to be against the actual Tory MP on the panel. It's quite a turnaround, I have to admit.
Particularly with NHS workers whose pay has failed to keep pace with inflation for over a decade. That's why the ask now is so high. But even those members of the public who I think want the government to act more toughly against strikers are angry that successive prime ministers haven't followed through on the 2019 manifesto pledge to bring in legislation to curb the ability of workers to strike and ensure minimum service.
Well, you have just brought that point up here in the Financial Times. Rishi Sunak under pressure to accelerate anti-strike legislation. Exactly what Lucy was talking about.
That's
What's
against
happened to
the
it? Where is it?
democratic rights.
I don't actually know at the moment.
I mean,
'cause
would
think
you like
they're
to see it?
focusing on the strike. I think we do need to make sure that we get the public sector working.
Right.
And absolutely. I look at my Chelmsford constituents, and many of them are waiting for operations, for example, because of
Well, then why not go ahead
of
with
the
this
pandemic.
anti-strike
The government's
legislation?
actually put quite a lot more money into the NHS. That was one of the winners in the autumn statement. But I think right now we need to resolve the situation and make sure that actually we have affordable pay rises across the whole
So do you think the
sector.
government should...
So I just wanted that point she made there. The Chancellor just recently put a record amount of, those money into the NHS, right? She says this whilst ignoring whilst neglecting to also add the context to which this supposed massive amount, is connected to. It's connected to 12 years of Tory neglect and underfunding of the NHS. Now, why would I say underfunding? Well, in comparison to other countries that are even more privatised than us, but still sort of try to do in a similar way to what we do, they're spending much more, and yet they're not even in half as much trouble as we are. It's ridiculous. The money goes into the NHS and then gets portioned off to certain managers and people right at the top, and then a large portion of it goes to private contractors. Where's the investment? A large portion of that money is supposed to go towards pay and investment, not to private companies. Why do private companies get the public money? That's my question.
Get on with this anti-strike legislation, which your colleagues, some of them, are calling for in order to prevent the situation.
I'm sure the government...
And it's calling for the banning of strikes for even certain sectors is completely anti-democratic. And I have people going, "Oh, it's not anti-democratic if it's voted in democratically." Well, it is anti-democratic in the sense of part of our democracy is to be able to strike, to withdraw one's labour. This is bullshit.
We'll be looking at all the different legislation that we need. I mean, for example, we're giving a lot of time at the moment to the online safety bill, which is really, really important. So often this is a question of how...
It's possible that they would struggle to push this through, and they're delaying it because of it. And like everything with Rishi Sunak, he could U-turn on it.
Things are tabled in Parliament. I'll be looking at the Financial Services and Markets Bill, which again is really important.
Well, I mean, as
There's
it so
a
happens...
bit about time.
Yeah,
in
no, I mean,
Parliament
Vicky
as
is
well.
pointing to also the fact Mark Harper has underlined this idea. It's not a priority, apparently. He's just said it in the Select Committee, the Transport Secretary. Is that a surprise?
No, it's not a surprise in a way. I think the government, is really struggling to get through any legislation at the moment on even more pressing issues.
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of those other pressing issues. Whether they're more pressing or not, I will leave viewers to decide. Because Rishi Sunak hasn't given in so far to the strikes or the strikers over pay or increasing the pay. But he has to his MPs over the rebellion on housing targets and onshore wind. Let's have a look at this headline in The Guardian. Onshore wind farm rule to be relaxed in new U-turn.
I will be a strong and unifying leader. Right. Okay. Haven't seen it yet, mate.
And this was despite him saying during the leadership campaign, this in a tweet. Rishi Sunak, energy self-sufficient by 2045, massive expansion in offshore wind, scrap plans to relax the ban on onshore wind. He has, in fact, just agreed to do precisely the opposite. What has it done to Rishi Sunak's authority, Vicky?
I think when I listen to colleagues and chat with colleagues, they've been quite pleased that the government's been listening to them. So I've asked a lot of colleagues what their views were on onshore wind, and most of them, provided the local community accepts it, they're relaxed. They see the need for energy security, for renewable.
But he was supposed to be coming in, and he was supposed to be a strong leader, unifying. Right. For some reason, I don't believe it.
Energy, and they're saying if local communities want it, they should.
Isn't
have
it embarrassing when you see that tweet, and it's very clear: scrap plans to relax the ban on onshore wind, and now he's agreed to relax the ban on onshore wind because of an amendment by Conservative colleague Simon Clarke. It's embarrassing.
Well, I think it's important that the government listens to what their MPs have got to say. Okay, and there's been a lot of stories.
And bend, even if he believes
there's been a lot of.
What? It's like a Tory reflex. Denial! Quick denial! Ah! Like, really? Accept the facts. Stop Donald Trumping everything.
Stories in the press about how the majority of the public would actually support more onshore wind. Public opinions changed.
Yeah.
We've seen the increasing rise in energy.
Where's the evidence of that?
Well, we've seen.
The only thing that's changed is Rishi Sunak's changed his view because of the circumstances.
Well, I think the circumstances have changed because of the huge rise in energy bills that people have.
When was
seen.
this? What was the date of this tweet from Rishi Sunak? It would have been this summer, long after the invasion of Ukraine.
I'm just telling you because the question is how.
I've heard this guy talk before, and he seems centrist, but maybe centre-right. But he's picking on the Tory here, and I think that's funny as fuck.
Who's awake?
I think that's absolutely funny as fuck. And again, it's a response of that. I think, but I think it's just hilarious.
How is Rishi's authority working?
That'll be Rishi's.
She just got a phone call in the middle of a live show. That's hilarious. Obviously, it's not live now, but it was live when it was shown. It's hilarious.
Sunak on the phone for you. I'll let you deal with the phone. But is it the right decision? If public opinion has moved, is it the right decision to actually say we should relax the ban on onshore?
The ban on onshore wind and solar power, by the way, was always ridiculous. The fact is
so you agree then?
The fact is that we should have been having more of a rush towards renewable electricity over the past few years in order to keep up with the not only with the issues around climate change, which is an emergency, but also
something I've not heard being talked about, and it's connected to this, is, it's all well and good with us needing to go onto the energy grid. Now, a large portion of our energy now is being done by renewables. A very, very small portion of our energy comes from Russia, from Rus. Now, what I can't understand, if that's the case, why are prices so high for us? Tell you, it's because of the international market. There needs to be reform in terms of energy and the international market, because how is it that we are paying out of our fucking arses? Yes, it's partly because of the government's mishandling, but given how much we supposedly are using of renewable energy, we shouldn't even be paying half as much. And the people who talk about new plants go looking for oil and gas at the sea, and it's like, but it won't even come to us. It will go straight to the international market. So how's that benefiting us? Unless you're really going to go isolationist on this. The international market needs reform. That's a conversation that needs to be brought up more often, I think.
To make sure that we're actually driving bills down. Instead, they've wasted billions upon billions on new.
And again, it's because we can set all this. We need more infrastructure building for green energy and such, and green fueling stations and whatnot. But the international market needs to evolve with it, because we can't be paying the same price for oil that we're paying for renewable. It's ridiculous.
Nuclear, which is going to take
Russia's war should not be impacting us this badly if we are not as connected to their pipelines as the rest of Europe. Technically, it shouldn't. But also, because of the way things have been made to work, that's how things technically work. And why?
decades to get going, and
if anyone has an answer, by the way, do let me know.
Leaves a massive environmental footprint afterwards. This should have been a priority for this UK government. It was actually not even included in the contracts for difference auctions, nor was solar. And they've put the UK, and fortunately Scotland has used environmental and planning powers to get round that so that we can license onshore wind. But they put the UK way behind where it should be in terms of getting renewable electricity put on the grid.
How embarrassing is this for Rishi Sunak, Lucy, when you think about both these U-turns? One on the housing targets, they're now no longer going to be mandatory, and as we've been talking about, the relaxation on onshore wind ban.
Yeah, and of course weakening the online harms bill too. I think it is embarrassing. You know, when you look on paper, the Conservative Party has a majority of 69. By historical standards, that's a very commanding majority, and you'd think the government would be able to push through quite a bold legislative agenda with that. And yet, he's inherited a party that is so split, that has got out of the habit of discipline. And indeed, I think many of the 2019 Red Wall MPs who arrived immediately, we sort of had the pandemic, and they grew up under a different sort of system, weren't as controlled by the whips. I think it's very difficult to see how he tries to stamp his authority on the party, get legislation through, and try and ward off this sense of drift at the heart of government.
Vicky?
First of all, sorry for the phone. That's my weekly alarm.
We're moving
to remind
on.
me it's nearly PMQs. But
You need an alarm to remind you of PMQs.
Anyway, get in and get my seat. So I think actually on this planning situation, you know, we only have a planning bill about once a decade. There were lots in the package that came out yesterday of suggestions from MPs. There was some.
Is that enough? Is my question on that one. Is housing planning bill once per decade, is it enough?
Really helpful things that will encourage more building on brownfield first, that will help stop the land banking, so to make sure that we can get homes, especially for young people. So a lot of MPs were saying, you know, my experience from my constituency, I'm seeing this. It's important that MPs can suggest improvements to a bill, and that's what's happened, and that's what I have felt with colleagues is they're glad they've been listened to.
But isn't the truth, Vicky, the reason that Rishi Sunak has been buffeted all over the place is because he doesn't have an anchor. He's ditched the Tory manifesto and loads of the pledges that were in it from 2019. You and your MP colleagues didn't endorse his leadership platform. So he doesn't have some firm agenda that he can impose discipline and say, you have to back this because I've got a mandate for it.
I think the Prime Minister has got an incredibly difficult time. We've got war in Europe for the first time in my lifetime. That is making massive economic...
This is hilarious. The foundations on which she's trying to have and argue back on is absolutely insane. It's an absolute sham. What the fuck are you talking about?
Pressure all across the world. No one had put in our manifesto, let's have a pandemic, let's have a war in Europe.
You war gamed for this before the pandemic. You were warned you needed to prepare for something on that kind of level. That was the next biggest threat. evidently we were not prepared, and you were the ones in charge. So I actually do blame you.
People understand that this is a huge challenge, and at the same
Not necessarily her individually, although. But the Conservative Party, as a government, I do blame them.
time, we're pushing through legislation that I think will make planning better, that will deal with some of the terrible things that happen on the internet. There's really important issues.
Okay. Let's move on. Let's have a look at this headline
Pathetic
in
response.
The Times. Gordon Brown, former Labour Prime Minister, his plan would give Holyrood extra scope for borrowing. This is all part of a report commissioned by Keir Starmer on Gordon Brown looking at devolution and...
I would like to have seen a Labour MP on here to back this up.
All sorts of plans to decentralise government from the centre. Let's talk to the Labour MSP, Sarah Boyack, there she is in Holyrood, who's also Scottish Labour's spokesperson on constitutional affairs. First of all, Sarah, what in all of this is going to change people's minds who want to see an independent Scotland?
Well, I think people want to see their government in Scotland delivering for them to get them through the crisis we've got in terms of the cost of living, and they want the powers to be used. I think for me, what this does is it says you don't need the division of, status quo versus independence. We could see a stronger Scotland, stronger parliament, stronger government in a transformed UK, and that is something that I think will actually begin to switch people across. We've already seen us doing well in by-elections in Scotland, and there's an appetite for change. People are fed up with the Tory government. They've been riding roughshod over devolution in recent years, but they really want change. And that, I think, is what a Labour government would deliver. And with the paper that Gordon Brown's put forward and that Keir Starmer has spoken so positively about, you can see we're doing the heavy lifting now. We're telling people this change is coming, sign up to it, and we will transform the country.
Okay. This isn't definite, obviously, but it looks like the setup here is you get the Labour person from Scotland who isn't in the studio, and she's going to say all this, and then it's going to be the part of the Tories and the SNP to tear it to pieces. That's going to be hilarious.
Country.
Drew?
Pretty thin gruel, actually, when you look at it. I think everybody remembers back to 2014 when Gordon Brown bought the vow out that we were going to have the most powerful parliament. We're going to be near federalism, and what we've seen since then is the Internal Market Act, stripping powers away from Scotland and so forth. So that's not happened. More importantly, in this paper, we know that things are not going to be delivered. The Labour Party have been telling us they're going to get rid of the House of Lords for 112 years, and they're saying it again. This is a thing they've passed down through the generations, I think, that manifesto to now. So I don't think anybody's taking it particularly seriously that that's going to happen. Of course, if there's a genuine...
I have to admit, that is a worry. But I wonder if Labour do get a majority, a big enough majority to be able to do this after the next election. And given how much time has been spent on this, and how much effort they're putting into this, I wonder how much of if they actually do now have a lot more of a plan to do this. I'd like to see more on this before I actually make a full decision on it, but
discussion on powers. We're always willing to have that, but what we've seen from Westminster time and time again is it just going back in its promises, as we've seen with the Brown vow of 2014, and as I'm pretty sure we'll see with this as well.
Sarah?
Yeah, I've just come back on that and say, actually, devolution has worked. It's been successful. We've got a strong parliament, which has got new powers over the years, as negotiated. But the crucial thing is that we need to use those powers. And, we discovered at the weekend, Scottish Government underspent by £2 billion In a budget of 50 billion, that's pretty shocking. So we need change. And on the particular point about the House of Lords, what is significant about this report is it's out in good time. We've now got the heavy lifting that's been done. And if you think back to 1997, Labour government got elected, Parliament was established in 2 years. That was massive constitutional.
Yeah, that was that Labour do. I suppose this time round, they don't have to do the whole making the whole parliaments for the developed nations.
No change. So this is serious. The heavy lifting is being done. We'll be consulting. We'll make sure it's in the manifesto. And can I just make one point? The UK is out of step across the globe. 780 odd appointed peers with the corruption we're seeing over the last few years. People want to change, whether it's Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle. There's an opportunity here, and a house that would be for the
London, Westminster, Newcastle, all English, and this is coming from a Scottish MP. Bit of a bluff on Labour's part there.
nations and regions, that would be transformative, and that's what's different. We're not just saying we want to change House of Lords, we're saying how, and we'll consult on the detail. And I take you back to 1997, we set up the Scottish Parliament, it's been successful. The bit we didn't focus on was taking power out the centre, and that's the key thing. 50,000 civil service jobs moving out of London, more powers to the mayors who've been very successful. So it's about democracy. And in Scotland, we need a bit of that as well, because we've got a government in Scotland that is centralising power. So time for change, a stronger Scotland in a transformed UK. I think the voters will like that.
What's not to like about that, Drew?
Well, the reality is, far from what Sarah's saying, is that the Westminster Parliament has been taking powers away. I mentioned the Internal Market Act.
Right, yeah, but it's not brought in by Labour. You're blaming this on the Tories. You're on Labour. You're trying to pick on Labour here, but this was something brought in by the Tories.
We saw the Brexit vote where 62% of people in Scotland voted against leaving the EU. That was completely ignored. Scotland's bid to have a discussion on that was completely ignored by Westminster here. We know that none of the things that were promised in 2014 have been delivered. We know that the very, as I pointed out, the very long-term promises from the Labour Party over the House of Lords are not going to be delivered. They're already rowing back on whether they do that or not.
Yeah.
Talking about consultations. This is not going to deliver the change that they're
Sarah,
makes the real difference for Scotland.
Can I ask you a question, Sarah? I mean, what I don't understand is what in this paper is going to persuade or change the minds of people who are in favour of independence, which is what you have to change those minds. They support Drew Hendry. What in this sort of commission is there that's going to change people's minds?
Well, there was only 30 to 35% of people thought we should have a referendum next year for independence. And I think the thing we'll be saying to independence supporters is, actually, independence is like Brexit times 10. Not my words, but somebody who supports independence.
But not for
And we've
Scotland.
got. Did you mind not interrupting me? I didn't interrupt you. The point is, this is serious politics. We want to entrench devolution. And that point I made earlier about power from the centre, we established the Synod and the Scottish Parliament. What we didn't do was to radically transform the centre of the UK, and that's what's different about this piece of work. And that.
Okay, and you could look at it again. There is the SNP do have a point. Will it work? However, if you look at it in the sense of a 2-stage or 3-stage or 4-stage plan, the guy might complain about the pullbacks on devolution, but that wasn't Labour, and it's likely to be Labour winning the next election, giving them more power. And if we get proportional representation, it'll be even more interesting.
That's why announcing it now, with Keir Starmer on side, means that this stuff's going to be in our manifesto, and people will know that that's what we'll get when they vote Labour.
Can I just talk?
UK.
Can I just talk about the House of Lords? Because actually, what is your objection? An elected House of Lords abolishing the way it's set up now? You could be part of that.
Well, what we've got at the moment, first of all, let's just put it in context. The House of Lords is a bloated organisation.
But we're talking about what's being proposed here by Labour.
Body outside in the world outside of communist China, I believe, just now. That's where we are at the moment in the UK. There's nothing, I'm not against reforming a House of Lords. What I'm against is the constant hot air about doing it and lack of action that actually comes from.
Right, again, I would come back on him here again with the argument of, look, we only had so much time to do what we did last time, and look what we did get done last time. If Labour are going to put the same effort into abolishing and then reform and then bringing in a new form of the House of Lords with the same effort that they put into making the Synod and the Synod in Wales and the Scottish Parliament, then I think it is entirely possible.
From it, whenever Tory or
I think
Labour,
what he's mistaking here is he's whilst the Tories and Labour are both unionist parties, the ideologies are still fundamentally different.
Party get into power, they've done no more than basic tinkering whenever they've been in power, despite the 100-odd-year promises for doing something with it. The interesting thing about this, though, is they would deny the people of Scotland their democratic right to have a referendum because of a mandate delivered to the Scottish Parliament, and yet they would have a referendum on these proposals, according to these papers. So a referendum for some people, but not for the people of Scotland who had voted time and time again.
Got to admit, that's a hard one to argue against. My personal point of view.
Well, Sarah, respond on that point.
Yeah, well, I said the opinion polls were clear. People in Scotland do not want a referendum now. And if I can remind you, it was the Scottish Government that actually took the case to the Supreme Court. So that is clear now. What we want is change, though, and that's what Labour would deliver. And
hang on, you say you will deliver it, Sarah, but I think you said it was 112 years or whatever it was regarding the House of Lords. What is the evidence that you would actually go ahead with this? Because senior Labour figures in the Lords, including the Speaker John McFall, don't like them. They don't like these proposals for an elected chamber, and they say it would challenge the supremacy of the House of Commons. So you don't even have sort of wholehearted support from the Labour Party.
No, I've spoken to a lot of Lords who are very supportive, and it's about democracy, it's about accountability, and I'll go back to the point, it's about taking power out of London. If you look at the economics in the paper that Gordon Brown presented, we've got inequalities, and they need to be addressed. And a key issue of a new House of Nations and Regions would be like the rest of the world, be more democratic.
House of Nations and Regions, that's what it would be called. Okay, interesting.
And it would
yeah, I'm getting more on board with this actually. I mean, to be fair, it wasn't like I wasn't already fully on board with reforming the House of Lords. But one thing I did question was what would you still keep the name House of Lords? I do like this. Gotta admit, I do like it.
Power Scotland, because at the moment we've seen the Tories ripping up devolution, and a key change we'd make is that the UK's got the power not normally to legislate on Scottish issues that are devolved to us, and the Tories have been overriding that. We would stop that happening, we'd remove that word, and we'd make sure that the powers we have in Scotland are ours to use, and they need to be accountable. And I just go back to, we set up the Scottish...
There's the argument. There's the argument back at the SNP. MP there.
Scottish Parliament.
MSP.
In 1997, that was our commitment. We did that. There's the same passion and there's the same energy across the UK. People want change. We'll deliver it.
Sarah Boyack there at Holyrood, thank you very much. Let me just show you this headline in The Independent. Speaker of Lords warns against wholly elected upper house of Parliament. I mean, this refers to the proposal we've been discussing, Lucy, but it's interesting that we've had John McFall, David Blunkett, and Peter Mandelson all saying they're very sceptical about this abolishing House of Lords reform idea and an elected second chamber.
Yeah, and in a way that's not surprising, is it? You don't get turkeys voting for Christmas.
No.
But there is something in what they say, I think, certainly David Blunkett and Peter Mandelson, and that this would soak up so much time and energy when we're heading into the longest recession since the Second World War. Is this the right priority? And therefore I'm not surprised that Keir Starmer has so far avoided making any firm commitment. And if I just add on the devolution point, I think the problem with devolution is either it's offered and it's a case of, it's met with ingratitude. It's a case of give an inch, take a mile. And north of the border in Scotland, people want more. And the rest of England, I'm not sure it does really meet and answer the disaffection that we've seen, the Brexit issue that Keir Starmer thinks it does. And when I think of some of the examples of where devolution has been offered, I love a decade ago in Hartlepool when they had the opportunity to elect their first mayor, they chose a bloke in a monkey suit, the local mascot. You know, people don't necessarily want machinery of government changes. They want growth, they want good jobs and opportunities. And the two things don't necessarily match up in people's minds.
I mean, is it really a priority for Keir Starmer in his first term if they win the next election?
I think the problem is most of us would probably agree on what the problems with the House of Lords are, that there are too many peers, that some of the peers who get picked are possibly not the right selection. Some names come to mind, people like Baroness Moan, questions about why on earth David Cameron put her in there in the first place. Then when it comes to working out what the answer is and what model you want instead, that's when it gets difficult, and then that's when it's quite knotty. And that's why, even though Keir Starmer is saying that it's possible he could do it in the first 5 years of a Labour government, I think when it actually comes to working out what is going to be in your manifesto for these first 5 years, I think it's probably quite likely that it won't be in there.
What do you think about House of Lords reform, abolishing?
I don't think it's a priority. I also don't
But,
think
but
that...
you don't think it's a priority, but is it a good idea to have an elected second chamber?
It is not a priority for my constituents. And indeed, in devolution, when I talk to my Scottish colleagues, they say, look, you've already got the powers over the NHS, schools, policing, run those well. Those are what the people of Scotland want. And as for Keir on the House of Lords, and he complains it's too big, he's appointed twice as many peers in his time as Jeremy Corbyn did in his much longer time. And who's he put there? He's put his union paymasters, the head of Unite, Unison, TUC.
Boris Johnson
yes,
Labour aren't here to answer. You've all stuffed the House of Lords with all sorts of cronies.
But that is important as well when you're looking at the relationship between government and the unions and strikes.
Right.
Okay. He's taken £22 million
But do you like
from
the idea
Unison,
of House? But do you like
and
the
then
idea of
pop
House
the
of
leader
Lords
in the
reform?
House of Lords. So of course you need to make sure you've got good people in the House of Lords, because scrutiny the upper chamber is really...
Union leaders in the House of Lords making sure that the unions, the people who represent the working people of Britain, get to scrutinise. Okay, see why that's a bad thing. Actually don't. But then the Tories, as I said before, see unions as the enemy.
Important.
What
I'm saying is that at a time when we've got massive global issues, again, we need to be focused, and I hope Labour would also focus on the issues that are priorities to people.
Let's have a look in the Telegraph. This headline: nearly 1 in 10 young people never intend to start working. That is quite a figure. It's the result of a new opinion survey for City and Guilds, the skills development organisation. Let's talk to Kirsty Donnelly, its chief executive. I mean, it's quite a shocking figure, isn't it, Kirsty? I mean, what's the reason behind it?
Well, yeah, no, it is very alarming, actually. And one of the reasons we decided to undertake the research is we wanted to really understand why was youth unemployment still so stubbornly high when we think about the marketplace we've got, with so many vacancies that remain still unfilled despite obviously all the talk of recession. And I think what we found that a long period of austerity is really now impacting young people. This is not just the COVID factor. It goes back, or the pandemic, although that will be playing into this. But it's all the other things that have happened, say, over the last 10 years or so in terms of lack of funding into the right education and skills, and generally speaking, young people just not seeing the aspiration and the opportunity that lies ahead of them, unfortunately, and worryingly, that they could go on to in terms of having good careers, and that's what we've got to really focus on putting right.
So is this an issue of them not being able to have the resources, and you talk about education, to pursue a career that they really have set their heart on? Because the figures say nearly 13% of 18 to 24-year-olds are classified as neither in work nor studying. So it's about the job market and it's about education.
No, I mean, it is. It's about those two coming together. I mean, I think it was 42% believe that they don't have the right education to equip them for the good jobs that they would like to be able to have. But I think it's much more nuanced than that, because within the survey, we know there are many young people who are facing lots of barriers and challenges that many adults haven't even had to face, around being young carers, having mental health and well-being issues, having been in the care system themselves, and so it's not just a case of just looking at one, the demographic of young person. It's about looking at all of those multiple issues that many young people that we actually surveyed are having to cope with. But there's no doubt they are feeling let down, broadly speaking, by government and employers as well.
Kirsty, stay with us. What do you make of that figure, Lucy? 1 in 10 intend not to work, never intend to work.
I find it extraordinary and just really depressing. I think young people have had such a difficult time in the pandemic. I think there's so many barriers to sort of security that face young people, whether it's the rental market, let alone trying to one day afford your own house, wage depression for many years, hostile labour market, the marginal tax rate for graduates, also very dispiriting for people coming out of university. John?
I think that you hear a lot from the government and about the record low in unemployment and how the figures are the lowest they've been in 40 years. Boris Johnson's last speech outside Downing Street was saying that the dole queue was shorter than the last time he was on a space hopper. But then when you delve into the details underneath this, the figures aren't quite so good. I think clearly what needs to be done here.
For so long, the media have brushed over Boris Johnson's lies. Max, if you watch this, and as in Maximilian Robespierre, if you do watch this, mate, do this bit, mate. Do this bit. Dude, we've got the media actually exposing Boris's lies, finally. Plainly and openly.
Is to encourage people into work, is matching what they want to do and making sure they've got the right skills so they can get into the jobs that there is need for people to do.
What was your reaction to the figure?
I was surprised to hear that it was that high. I mean, obviously, you're absolutely right, Lucy, on the pressure that young people have faced, especially during the pandemic. But I would say a couple of things. First of all, I remember the awfulness back in the last recession that we had 1 million young people not in education, employment or training. That's come down. There's been 5 million apprentices started since 2010. And I speak to many young apprentices who are really pleased. The Kickstart programme that we had
so
during
why so many people never intending to start working? Because we just
quarter of 1 million jobs were started.
But that doesn't stack up, does it, with those figures? Because if there were so many great
you're being basically called a liar. Essentially.
Opportunities out there, you wouldn't have this number of people saying.
So what I would say to any young person who's thinking about is the not the right job for me, do not have the right skills. If they've already finished their education, please go into your local job centre. I was in my local job centre on Friday. They're doing fantastic work, bespoke one-on-one work to try and find the right opportunities. We have put in the lifetime skills guarantees, which will help people of all ages to be able to go and get skills that they want to find the right job. And obviously, the changes we're bringing in education with T-levels and other technical education to try and make sure that we better match young people's education.
A lot of people in the business that I've heard from the business sector saying that this idea of T-levels, they think actually makes the whole thing more complicated. Actually. So, once again, the Tories are talking out their fucking arse.
with what employers offer is coming through, and that is also making a big difference. But my number one thing would be to say, if you don't think the right job is there for you, go into the job centre,
This woman has no... Tories don't have a clue about... They say, oh, just go into the job centre. I was someone who had to... Before, my body was like, no, you're not doing shit. Yeah, I was constantly going into the job centre, and I go into the computer and I look for jobs. And the problem is nothing suiting my skill set. And I was not... A lot of people these days, a lot of younger people these days, don't actually aspire to do a job they don't want to do. A lot of people will just do a job they don't want to do just to get the money. But there are plenty out there that won't do it, that won't ruin their mental health even more than it's already been ruined, because they've seen how working for a job that is just mind-numbing ruins your mental health. They've seen how that affects their parents and the older people around them. So why would they want that for themselves?
Make an appointment, get the advice. I've seen it firsthand.
I mean, the situation's not...
They don't... She doesn't get it at all. She might see it, but she sees it and doesn't understand it, like, at all. And, like being someone who grew up initially in, I was never in what you could say, even in a middle class situation. But I've lived in on the rough side of things, and this woman has no idea what she's talking about. None at all.
Much better in Scotland, Drew. The number of young people who are unemployed in Scotland has jumped by 15,500 over the last year, with youth unemployment rate rising from 8.3% to 13.5%. Is it a similar sort of situation? The reasons behind it, that young people don't think they have the education and skills to pursue the jobs that they would like?
Well, it's a shocking figure. The UK-wide figure is shocking. If you're telling me, I haven't seen the sub-figures for Scotland that have been pulled in.
I am neither. But it's just... Why are we even at this point? Why? Because the Tories believe in a small state. Essentially, that's it. People ask, why don't the Tories do more? Because they don't want to. They'll say they do, but they don't. That's the whole thing about being conservative. That's the whole problem with being conservative.
This research, but if you're telling me it's somewhere near that, then that's something that obviously has to be looked at. I don't have the answers for you here about why that's happening just now. I know there's a lot of effort going in Scotland to make sure that people have the access to apprenticeships, that they get the access to further education. We've scrapped tuition fees in Scotland to make it easier for people to go to university.
Well, that's been quite a long time, though, hasn't it?
Exactly so. But as I say, I don't know the background for the figures that you're quoting just now, or indeed what they are from that report. But I would say there's a lot of effort going into it. We do need to make sure that, wherever we are, whatever nation of the UK is, that we're creating a place of hope for young people. And we have to focus on that in terms of how we develop policy.
Well, it's interesting, your issue, as you say, of hope. This is the Guardian headline. New UK disability claims double in past year, with fastest rise among teens. That's according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Say claims for the personal independence payment has doubled to 30,000 a month between the summer of 21 and July.
This is due to the decline of the NHS under the Tories. Like, you can literally label it as that. There's other factors, but the biggest factor is that.
Year. Do you think to some extent the pandemic has promoted a culture of dependency?
I think, well, first of all, it's been really important that we can get those payments out to people who need them, okay? And we have put more supportive people with disabilities. But also, the other thing I saw when I was in my job centre on Friday is the work that's been happening with people who have disabilities to try and enable them to get into work. And that is does need extra support, but that is going in. And it's absolutely remarkable when you talk to some of the people who've been supported, how that's giving them hope, maybe helping them with mental health issues, which might have been part of it as well.
Well, Kirsty, what do you think? Do you blame the pandemic? You mentioned it in your earlier answers to be only partly responsible, but you listened to those figures there from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Do you think that may have some sort of bearing in terms of the position for young people and trying to find their way in the job market?
Well, there's no doubt it's exacerbated it, absolutely. But when you actually look at the data that lies behind it, which is why I say we can't just keep using the pandemic as the only reason. I mean, we're talking here about people who have received, well over a quarter have received free school meals over a long period of time. This is pre-pandemic. People have been a young carer pre-pandemic. So I think the pandemic has definitely exacerbated it. But of course, in some respects, you would argue, as I said earlier, given the amount of job vacancies there should be even greater opportunities for these young people. If only we could get the right careers advice and guidance. And I absolutely accept the reference to the job centres, but I think we need to do much more than that. We need to get out into the communities where the most disadvantaged are, in the sense that someone, for example, who's been a young carer is more likely to be 3 times less likely to access education, training or a job. And the job centre is not necessarily the answer. So we need to have much more grassroots ways of getting to these young people.
Kirsty Donnelly there, Chief Executive of City and Guilds. Thank you very much. Craig McKinley, your Conservative colleague, Vicky, has said that perhaps benefit sanctions should be introduced. This is him responding to the survey by the City and Guilds. He said it cannot be right for the taxpayer to support a lifetime of young people on benefits because they don't intend to work.
So I actually asked the Secretary of State about benefit fraud in a question on Monday in the House of Commons, because I do think it's important that one's doing both, that you're making sure that people who need benefits get them. That's why we did the uprating of benefits in the autumn statement, but that we're also tackling benefits fraud. And I was quite impressed with his answer that it was over 100,000 people have their accounts have been stopped due to fraud. They're absolutely focusing on it. And it was, again, something the government said in the autumn statement to make sure that we've got that focus on people who...
The problem is the sanctions are bad enough. We're under a cost of living crisis and they want to make it harder. Their solution is to make it harder. Every bloody time with the Tories, it really is.
If they shouldn't be getting it, then they shouldn't get it.
Yeah.
If they should be getting it,
well, of course.
They should.
I mean, that's how.
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, this is why I believe in a universal basic income, where everyone gets a certain amount of money. I'd also tax a lot more out of the fucking rich people, bring their fucking wallets down a fair bit. Spread that money out a bit more. Fucking ridiculous. This Tory ideology is so cuntish, it's unreal. But I'll reiterate, what the Tories want to do is make things as small a state as possible. That's what they want. That's why we're not getting the help we need. And it's not about, by the way, the universal basic. It's not about making it so that nobody has to work. It's about making it so that you aren't to live. You aren't enslaved to some kind of employer. It doesn't have to be like that. But this is how the Tories would and the right wingers would have you pull it off, because that's how it has been. This is how it always has to be, because they are conservative. They don't believe in this shit. They're as bad as Christians in this sense. It's ridiculous. And she is wearing a fucking crucifix.
How the system's supposed to work. But what do you think of what Craig McKinley is saying?
That's absolutely the wrong approach. The pandemic hasn't heightened the culture of dependency. It's actually impacted people in their mental health and affected them in their homes. So it's natural that there should be an increase in the need for people to seek support. What I would say is this: that you're constantly going towards benefit fraud when it's in every possible examination. It's an absolutely tiny percentage of the issue with social security is just a dogmatic and ideological way to approach this.
I like that from the SNP MSP there. I do like that.
What needs to be done is to have a good look at what the kind of support that people need. And as we're talking, if you want to give young people hope, if you want to give them the support, then that benefit system, the social security system, should be geared towards making sure people have got equal opportunities to get ahead in life. And we should be supporting them, not castigating them.
Let's welcome viewers from the BBC News channel. You're watching Politics Live. We've got about 7 minutes until Prime Minister's questions. We'll take a look in the chamber in just a moment. We were talking about the reasons behind why so many young people, it seems from a recent survey, have said they don't intend to start work. You were disagreeing with Drew, Vicky. What were you saying?
No, I wasn't saying that people shouldn't get benefits. I said it's important that we do support young people. And the different changes that we're bringing in with the different types of technical education, the skills that they can get, and this is why we're bringing in T-levels, because that's all been in consultation with employers about what sort of skills do they need young people to be trained for. The increase in apprenticeships. I run an annual apprenticeship fair. It's really popular in my constituency,
universal credit.
so that they can have. I think we've uprating benefits in line with inflation for those who need it most. And there was additional universal credit support during the pandemic. You can't keep on the pandemic support forever.
Okay.
We know that.
Let me just show you this BBC News story. Stephen Flynn elected as new SNP leader at Westminster. Your colleague, that election happened last night, so there'll be a change to the lineup at Prime Minister's Questions. It'll be Stephen Flynn asking questions of Rishi Sunak rather than his predecessor, Ian Blackford. Will there be a change of tone?
I like Ian Blackford.
I think he'll bring a fresh approach to Prime Minister's Question Time. I think anybody who's listened to him over the past day since last night, since he's been elected, can tell that he wants to take a different way. That's what Ian has been doing for 5 years. Has been very successful. I think most commentators feel that he's been very effective when he's been doing this. I think Stephen will just bring a different approach, and I think it'll be a good one.
And will it be different in the sense that he will stand at odds to some of the principles and policies of Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister? I'll just show you this in the Daily Telegraph. Nicola Sturgeon's crazy position on North Sea oil faces challenge from SNP's rising star, the rising star being Stephen Flynn. Now, this is over.
If this is true, this would be interesting, I've got to admit. Again, when it comes to all this, oil projects and shit, why? Why are we not pushing towards putting more investment into green tech? Because right-wing conservative types don't like change. They just don't like it. So they don't want other people to have it. It's ridiculous, despite the fact that they've already had to go through a load of fucking change. It's ridiculous. Change is almost inevitable. So it's one of the absolutes. These things will change. And the Tories' ideology is just wishful thinking. That's all it is.
Decisions on whether or not to explore or extend and grant licences for more exploitation of oil and gas. Stephen Flynn in favour of it, much more so than Nicola Sturgeon, because of the jobs in the area.
What both of them have said. I mean, this is, people love when they've got the SNP trying, put them in the same context.
I like how Phil from A Different Bias explained this. The SNP have centrists, lefties, and right wingers on their side. It's just a lot. Oftentimes, this is missed on because their opposition, the main opposition, has been the Tories.
There's Labour and the Tories of Westminster and pretend there's some big falling out going on. There isn't.
I'm not falling out, but I'm saying there's a different position.
Nicola Sturgeon and Stephen are on the same page in terms of the need for a just transition from oil and gas to renewables. In fact, the Scottish Government have invested £500 million, not matched by the UK Government, in the North East, and they're absolutely on the same page about doing that. There is no dispute about it.
All right, let's just
say thank you for the 200,000 you got yesterday, though, from that Scotland got from the Shared Prosperity Fund.
Are you going to say thank you for the 50?
Oh, I see where this is going. Right.
Well, say thank you.
Oh, It's so condescending from the Tories. What a bitch.
I say thank you on both your behalves. We'll just dip into the chamber. Questions continuing for another 5 minutes or so until we see Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer take their places at the dispatch box. Just briefly, partly the question to or about Stephen Flynn and Nicola Sturgeon's position on oil and gas is ahead of this coal mine decision in Cumbria, which we are expecting today from Michael Gove, not just divisions in the Conservative Party over the issue of fossil fuels. It'll be a big deal, won't it?
It will be. It's a decision that's been on the back burner for quite a bit of time. It was talked about a bit about when we had the COP Climate Change Summit in Glasgow. They were talking about should we be telling countries around the world to stamp out coal, where there was still a possibility we could have this new coal mine in the UK. And I think that's why you will hear from quite a few Tory voices who are opposed to this, including people like Alok Sharma, who was the COP president during that conference.
I think we can either see, or certainly I can trail Peter Barnes, my colleague from the Political Research Unit. He will be keeping an ear across any of the claims and counterclaims. There he is. Hello, Peter. As to what is happening during Prime Minister's questions. So more from him after PMQs. Let me just show you this headline in the Eye. Labour takes in more donations than the Conservatives for the first time in 6 years. How much should we read into this in terms of the strength of the party, John?
I think the Labour Party is obviously buoyed by these figures, and I think it shows that a lot of people are now starting to see them as a serious party of government. You talk to shadow front benchers, and they're saying that for the last few years they've not had so many invitations to go and speak to business leaders, but all of a sudden everyone wants to speak to them and work out what exactly would they do if they get into power.
Disappointing that you're losing the sort of financial support that you've had.
Oh, I'm just interested in, again, I've mentioned it before, the Labour relationship with the unions, because that is their big paymaster.
It's not anymore, though.
No,
if you look at those
over
figures,
the last
£4.7 million, and how much of it was from the unions, Vicky?
Over the last since 2010, okay, £46 million
Let's talk about now, Vicky.
But, what's
12 years
happening
ago.
right now is that people in my constituency are going to face the impact of these strikes, and they want to know.
Oh my fucking God, she just can't help herself. She can't answer. The Tories are so much on the back foot that a simple question is put to them, and once again, the strikes, quick, the strikes, use the strikes as an excuse to get out of answering this question that I know I can't fucking answer without making my party look like dickheads.
That you've got a government.
And can you hear how much she's reaching? I know you can't see. She's doing all this, and she's reaching. You can hear it in her voice. My God.
That isn't in the pay of the unions. And I think when you look at Labour again and again and again, they're in the pay of the unions.
Or would you admit that the relationship? But would you admit the relationship has changed?
Do you know what's really funny? The Labour Party wouldn't be where it is without the unions. So yeah, but for some reason, like I said, the Tories like to pass the unions off as the bad guys constantly.
Change then, listening to the figures now, that it's not the same relationship, and some of the unions, of course, have disaffiliated from
I still think that time and time again it is impossible for Labour to divorce themselves from their relationship with the union and say that they are
She's been proven to be bullshitting as she talks. Stop talking.
An independent government.
Well, Labour aren't here, but John, it is interesting because they do have to perform contortions sometimes when they're responding to backing the unions and strikes, as opposed to just supporting workers.
Oh, definitely, and I think you've seen that last couple of months. I don't think it's been particularly easy for Labour when dealing with this. But their lines at the moment, they're saying the government's being unreasonable. We saw Angela Rayner yesterday saying the militants round here with the government not being able to get around the table and sort this out.
Lucy, the temperature in politics generally has come down a notch or two from a very high bar. It's not quite as high octane as it has been this year. Is that a win for Rishi Sunak?
I'm not sure it is. I think there needed to be a reset in terms of the pace after, frankly, the circus at the end of the Johnson and the short-lived Truss administration.
Everyone's nodding away with you
Everyone's
there.
nodding. But it does leave a vacuum. You know, I've been interested this week, a couple of stories from the Times splashing on opposition research, first on ambulance figures, and then, and in fact, another NHS story from Labour. So if the government is trying to stop the pace of politics moving at such breakneck speed, that does allow Labour, the Lib Dems, the SNP to speak more. And of course, issues like strikes aren't going to go away. So,
do you think it's a deliberate strategy by Number 10? Do you think that is what they're actively doing? It's not just that Rishi Sunak is a different politician and a different Prime Minister.
Yeah, I do. I think there is a renewed sense of seriousness in Downing Street as well, about wanting to grapple with policy issues seriously, not try and gamify the media by having an ever-running hamster wheel of announcements of things that aren't necessarily going to happen. They want to take their time a bit more to try and grip some of their priorities. They know there's only 2 years left till the next election. It needs to be things like the small boats crisis. They want to think about how to try and deal with that.
I like how she jumps to the small boats crisis, despite the fact that these so-called illegals aren't even illegal.
And deliver. But it does mean there is this sort of vacuum that is being filled with dissenting voices and with some of the sort of issues that are facing the country.
I think we can probably go into the chamber shortly. Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, reading out...
Again, this is different. Usually I just do PMQs and a bit of an analysis from Beth Rigby from Sky News. This is a bit different. It's going to be we're already over an hour long, but this is going to be longer. I just wanted to, like I said, this was, what's her fucking name? I didn't even say. The Tory here, it's completely bullshitting out her ass, and the journalist opposite her are just tearing her to pieces as she talks. As she bullshits, they're calling her out on her bullshit. It's hilarious.
Notices just before Prime Minister's question starts, just before we do go in. Vicky, do you agree with that? It's left a vacuum.
I think when I talk to my constituents, they want stability. You know, we've seen, as you know, a very bumpy time. They know that we're in the middle of this war in Europe. They know the impact that that's had on prices. And it's incredibly difficult for whoever's trying to govern at the moment.
Let's go into the chamber. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today. Dr. Philippovic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the United Kingdom in its current form turned 100 years old. But neither the Prime Minister nor the leader of the Labour Party seemed to recognise the challenge of the Supreme Court ruling as to the very nature of the union. He didn't answer me 2 weeks ago, so can the Prime Minister clarify if he still believes the UK is a voluntary union? And if so, can he explain the democratic route by which the people of Scotland can choose whether to stay in it or not?
Got to pause it there. Whilst essentially I'm a unionist, I am on the side of Scotland having its independence if it wants. I'm sorry, I am, because unless we get PR as a voting system in this country, the Tories are just going to keep ripping up devolution and making it Scotland feel like a vassal state.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we fully respect the decision of the Supreme Court and believe strongly in the United Kingdom. And as I said to the Honourable Lady last time, we will work constructively with the Scottish Government to deliver for the people of Scotland.
A non-answer. They're being undemocratic. The question wasn't, what are you going to do to work with us? The question was, what routes are there for Scotland to leave if they want to? And there evidently is none, because he refuses to answer. Again, I believe that we should be a united kingdom. However, if one of them wants to leave, they should be able to leave if they want. It shouldn't be up to England to tell Scotland whether it can leave or not. Now, I've not heard an actual logical response to that, to my answer there. So, Rishi Sunak, once again, following Boris Johnson's line of things in non-answers. And lying.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Financial scams are the most common form of crime, causing immense emotional and financial distress to millions of people. And government efforts in this matter have tended to focus on making sure that scammers can't launder their proceeds of crime and that victims get compensation. Both of those are really important, but they're acting after the scams happened. Does my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree with me that government departments, regulators and industry, perhaps guided by an anti-scams task force, could do far more to stop scams happening in the first place? And will he meet with me to talk about this?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is right to highlight the hurt that scammers and fraudsters can cause.
Then why don't you pull it up on the between 11 and 15.5 billion pounds of COVID fraud then, you cunt? Complete bullshit.
We are working closely with industry to block more fraudulent calls from reaching the public, and importantly, our new online safety bill will place duties on the largest internet companies to tackle scam ads. I would be happy to meet with my honourable friend.
Where's the reinforcement?
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Hey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by welcoming the new Member of Parliament for the City of Chester to have
What a win.
It's the best result for Labour in the 105 years we've been fighting that seat, and I look forward to working with her to build a better future for the people of Chester. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party promised the country it would build 300,000 houses a year.
It's very stylish.
This week, without asking a single voter, the Prime Minister broke that promise by scrapping mandatory targets. What changed?
Lol. Wipe out.
Mr. Speaker, let me start by also welcoming the Honourable Lady to her place. Now, the Honourable Gentleman comes here every week, and I know he's focused on the process and the politics, but I don't think he's actually taken the time to read the detail of what we are doing to improve our planning system. So let me just explain what we are doing. Mr. Speaker, we are protecting the green belt. We are investing millions to develop brownfield sites. And we're providing support and protection for local neighbourhood plans. Just this morning, the shadow...
None of which is enough. None of which is enough, you fucking lying bellend.
Housing Secretary said, communities should have control over where homes are built and what sort of homes are built. That's my position, that's her position. What's his position?
Mr. Speaker, does he really expect us to believe that the member for Chipping Barton and the member for the Isle of Wight are cheering him on because he's going to build more homes? Pull the other one.
Fucking brutal.
I'll tell him what changed. His backbenchers threatened him. And as always, the blancmange Prime Minister wobbled. He did a grubby
Bit harsh on blancmanges.
deal with a handful of his MPs and sold out the aspirations of those who want to own their own home. Was it worth it?
No.
Mr. Speaker, as ever, engaging in the petty personality politics, not focused on the substance. Again, let me explain what we're doing. We're delivering what I said we would do. We're protecting the character of local communities. We're cracking down on land banking and irresponsible developers. And we're giving people a greater say in their decisions. Just this week, Mr. Speaker, on Monday, the Honourable Gentleman said the government should be giving people more power and control. Now he seems to be opposing that policy. It's only Wednesday. I know he flip-flops, but even for him it's pretty quick.
Mr. Speaker, he's forgotten. Last week, I offered him Labour votes to pass these housing...
Oh, I love that. He must have felt so confident after his response there. And Starmer comes in with, boom! We could have got this done together if you decided to not play party politics, you fucking lying bastard.
Target, because this is bigger than politics. The former Housing Secretary, on their side, said scrapping mandatory targets would, this is his words from their side of the House, be a colossal failure of political leadership. No wonder he doesn't want to fight the next election, Mr. Speaker. The author of the manifesto that they all stood on said it would cut building by 40%, perhaps even more. Why would he...
See, the problem with the housing, one of the problems I've got with housing, there are plenty of houses that are empty for one reason or another, and nothing's been done with it because no one can be bothered because the Tories don't like dealing with this shit. Everyone should just deal with their own shit. Why should the state help? It's fucking stupid. Not only that, but new houses being built have got to have all the new stuff in it, which means it needs to be funded properly, state funded. And because the Tories are so stingy, they say they're giving out record amounts, but given the rise in the population, it's not enough. And the current demands, it's not enough. They are stringent, very stringent, believe it or not. It sounds, what they've done is, it sounds generous, but considering, taking into context the last 12 years as well, it's insane.
Rather cripple house building than work with us to get those targets through.
Mr. Speaker, we're not going to work with the Labour Party on housing. You know why? We'll have a look at their record on housing.
I'm sorry. First 8 years. I'm just going to ruin him here before he's got a chance to say shit. First 8 years of Labour Parliament, of Labour government, every single, I think it was 5 years, could be 8 years though, every single year, at least 200 homes were being built. So, again, his argument falls to pieces.
In London, the former Conservative mayor in 5 years built 60,000 affordable homes. The current Labour mayor, half of that amount.
Here's another thing. Do you know where the mayor gets his budget? Same place as the other mayors in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland get their budgets from Westminster, from the government. Sadiq Khan has got less of a budget in comparison to what he needs than Boris Johnson had. And Sunak thinks this is on based on this that he can ignore that context. It's ridiculous.
In Wales, we want to build 12,000 homes. What are Labour delivering? Half of that, Mr. Speaker.
Again, budget.
The Labour Party talks, the Conservatives deliver.
No, you deliver misery. That's what you deliver. The problem is for 10 years you have fuck all. Then you had the pandemic, and now they're trying to say, and now they've given out a bit more cash than they usually give, saying, "Oh, now we're giving out record amount. What are you complaining at us for?" Fuck you, cunt.
Mr. Speaker, as ever, too weak to stand up to his own side on
exactly.
behalf of the country. Mr. Speaker, I noticed There was another U-turn last night, this time on wind farms. Actually, I agree with that one, but is there no issue on which he won't give in to his backbenchers? Now, Mr. Speaker, how did his colleague, Baroness Moan, end up with nearly £30 million of taxpayers' money in her bank account?
Mr. Speaker, let me say, like
Dodge on
everyone
this
else,
one.
I was absolutely shocked to read about the allegation.
Bollocks. The reason why I call bollocks, and with more certainty than I usually do, is because he was Chancellor. He was the one who had the control of the public purse strings, so to speak. So go fuck yourself, you lying prick.
It's absolutely right. It's absolutely right that she is no longer attending the House of Lords and therefore no longer has the Conservative whip.
Okay, A, she should still be attending the House of Lords because the reason she gave for not attending is actually a pile of wank. And two, only like not long before this, we were being told that she's still at the whip. So what?
The one thing we know about the honourable gentleman, he is a lawyer. He should know there's a process in place. It's right that that process concludes. I hope that it's resolved promptly. But I'll say one thing, Mr. Speaker, because I tell him, he mentioned, I tell him what is weak. I tell him what is weak is not being able to, I'll tell him, and that's not being able to stand up to people. I know he's taken some advice from Gordon Brown lately.
Taking advice is different. This guy who worked for the banks that Gordon Brown had to work to save. You stupid moron. What a stupid argument. I mean, this is coming from someone, right? He tries to bring in Gordon Brown here, but this is coming from someone who worked for one of the banks, i.e. Lieberman's bank, who were desperate to be bailed out by the governments. Of whose plan Gordon Brown was one of the biggest leaders of, the main leader of. So Rishi Sunak can die in a hole on this one. He can literally go fucking do one on this one. Again, it's an argument that's it's got more holes in it than Swiss cheese. I tear him to pieces. I wish I could stand face to face with this prick. I would tear him to pieces.
Why doesn't he listen to a former minister in Gordon Brown's government who just said, why does the Labour Party refuse to stand up for workers in businesses like pubs and restaurants who will lose business as a result of the train strikes?
Why do we have train strikes, Rishi?
Should stand up for working people.
The people on strike are also working people, you fucking bellend. Stop trying to drive in the division that doesn't exist. Cunt.
If he's strong, that's what he should do.
Mr. Speaker, it may not seem like it, but he's supposed to be the Prime Minister. This morning...
He's been demolished.
This morning, his Transport Secretary said that his flagship legislation on strikes, this is what he said this morning, his Transport Secretary, might want to listen to this, is clearly not going to help with the industrial action we're facing. He should stop grandstanding, stop sitting on his hands, get round the table and resolve these issues.
It's hilarious. The Tories are like, oh, unions this, unions that. You heard that fucking Vicky twat before. What they don't understand is that what Thatcher did hamstrung the actual power the unions had. This is actual working people having had enough of Tory bullshit. But again, they can't own up to it because that would prove Starmer right, in that they are fucking weak.
Everyone can see what's happening here. A Tory politician got their hands on hundreds of millions in taxpayers' money.
Oh, I love that. Dealt with what Rishi Sunak's bollocks and coming right back round to Baroness Moon.
Then provided Duff PPE, and he says he's shocked He was the Chancellor. He signed the cheques. How much is he going to get back?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr.
Such
Speaker,
a good line to attack him
it's
on.
right that he brought.
Yes, there's an investigation on, so he's not going to answer in detail anyway. But it's such a good line to attack him on.
Up legislation with regard to strikes, so I'm very happy to address it, actually. So, hard-working families right now in this country
are striking.
Facing challenges. The government has been reasonable. It's accepted the recommendation
Bollocks.
of an independent pay body.
Without challenge.
Giving pay rises, in many cases, higher than the private sector.
Most of the time, it's not.
But if the union...
Actually, this time round, the public sector, by and large, has had lower pay rises than the private sector. So go fuck yourself, Rishi Sunak.
Leaders to continue to be unreasonable, then it is my duty to take action to protect the lives and livelihoods of the British public.
Who are going on strike? Members of the hard-working British public going on strike.
That's why, Mr. Speaker, since I became Prime Minister, I have been working for new, tough laws to protect people from this disruption.
The Tories are really misreading the situation. They really are.
That's the legislation he's asking about. Will he now confirm that he'll stand up for working people and that he and his party will back that legislation?
He's not going to back that legislation. Not only that, but the Tories have now also come out and said, the Labour Party have also come out and said that any anti-strike legislation is going to be instantly repealed when Labour come back into power. So what's the fucking point?
Mr. Speaker, he's obviously not heard what his Transport Secretary said about that legislation this morning. And it's obvious why they're so opposed to Labour's plans to clean up Westminster. They all voted for tax rises for working people, while one of their unelected peers pocketed millions flogging dodgy PPE. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to raise something that is worrying parents across the country. Our hearts go out to the families of the children who've tragically died from the outbreak of Strep A in recent weeks. I'm very happy to work with the government on this. So can he take the opportunity to update the country on the measures the country is taking to keep...
Nice line to use here. If Sunak goes all party political here, now, after this, I think this is the last question, he's going to look like a major dickhead. So I think he might just... I don't know. He might... Will he answer it?
Children safe this winter?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my thoughts are, of course, with the families of the children who have sadly lost their lives. We are seeing a higher number of cases from Strep A this year compared to usual. What I can say is that the NHS, who I have sat down to talk about this, are working very hard to make sure parents are aware of the symptoms that they should be looking out to, because this can be treated appropriately with antibiotics. There are no current shortages of drugs available to treat this, and they're well established.
Sorry, actually, the British Medical Agency, I can't remember what the exact naming is, said that that's actually false, Mr. Sunak, so keep up.
Procedures in place to ensure that that remains the case, and the UK SHA are monitoring the situation at pace, and what they have confirmed is that this is not a new strain of Strep A, so people should be reassured about that. There is no reason to believe that it's become more lethal or more resistant to antibiotics, so the most important thing for parents to do is look out for the symptoms and get the treatment that is available for them.
Okay, whilst there was that one line there, it sounds like, yeah, he didn't finish on an attack there. Yeah, so that was the last question for Starmer. It looks like it was a case of, I'm not gonna carry on with that. I'm not gonna continue to attack here. That was nicely done, Starmer. They attack, and on the last question, leave it so Sunak can't do it, can't grandstand. Starmer controlled that. I actually find it kind of funny that I find it kind of funny that we're in a situation now where Labour are again. I would prefer someone else in charge of Labour. Starmer was not my pick, and I do think he should be further left. But when I look at it, the country isn't so far left. The rest of the population isn't. Whilst a lot of the things in the last Corbyn manifesto were popular, were they popular enough? And I think for me personally, yeah, I don't like his Brexit take, although I do recognise the reason why he has to take it. So, whilst I don't like it, I see it as pragmatic. I don't like what I'm hearing about the blocking of especially more left-wing or further candidates for seats that are further left-wing are being blocked. I'm not sure on the certainty of this, but there's been quite a few stories on this. I'm not happy about that. But right now, Labour are the ones who actually look like a party that could govern. And I say could. I'm not an absolutist. I don't want people to think that I'm a Starmer stooge. I'm not one of these fucking idiots that believe everything that Starmer says. However, I'm not an absolutist, so I'm going to give him a chance. And unlike it would have been for the Boris Johnsons, at the very least, I think that Labour could actually get stuff done. At least some fixing done. The Lib Dems ain't gonna do it, and they're not big enough anyway. So, and I'd rather vote for Labour than not vote, and my absence of a vote help the Tories. That's how I see it, personally. I'm not going to do the rest of PMQs, although I will fast forward a bit to the new leader of the SNP.
Indeed said that we will deliver a new tourist accommodation registration scheme, something I know my honourable friend has asked for. It will increase appropriate regulation of the sector, better understand and monitor the impact on local communities, and we will also consult on whether planning permissions should be required for new short-term holiday lets, especially in tourist hotspots.
Right. Can I welcome the new leader of the SNP and thank you in Blackford previously.
Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to begin by paying tribute to my friend and colleague, the Right Honourable Member for Ross Skye and Loch Ærra, who has served us with diligence and duty for the last 5 years. Mr. Speaker, he is a giant of the Scottish independence movement. Mr. Speaker, he's seen off not one, not two, but 3 consecutive Tory Prime Ministers. Indeed, he was on to his 4th in recent weeks. And to that latest Prime Minister, I have a very simple question. What does he consider to be the greatest achievement of the Conservative Party in government since 2019? Leaving the single market and customs union, ending freedom of movement, denying Scotland her democracy, or getting the Labour Party to agree with all of the above?
Mr. Speaker, can I start by offering my genuine and warm, heartfelt best wishes to the Right Honourable Member for Ross Skye and Lochaber. I know the whole House will miss his weekly contributions. And may I also congratulate or join the First Minister in congratulating the Honourable Gentleman on his appointment.
Nice difference to bringing a First Minister into it, but it's not going to do any difference.
As a Westminster leader of the SNP, I look forward to a constructive debate with him across the dispatch box. And Mr. Speaker, the answer...
What's going to be constructive about it, Rishi? He's going to ask you something like he's done, and you're not going to give him an actual answer. So, what's constructive?
This question is actually very simple. The things that we are most proud of in the last couple of years is making sure that we protected this country through the pandemic with furlough and with the fastest vaccine rollout.
So, nothing out of that list that Flynn came out with. Nothing.
Mr. Speaker, far be it for me to offer advice to a near billionaire, but he's going to have to up his game. And here's why, because in the last 15 minutes, a poll has landed which shows that support for Scottish independence has now hit 56%. And support for the Scottish National Party sits north of 50%. So in that context, can I ask the Prime Minister, does he consider that increasing energy bills on households in energy-rich Scotland by a further £500 will cause those poll numbers to rise or to fall?
I like this guy.
Mr. Speaker, what we're delivering for households across the United Kingdom, including those in Scotland, is £55 billion of support with energy bills. It will save a typical homeowner about...
Not only that, but you're still keeping the loopholes in for this for this so-called windfall tax. So again, it's an argument full of holes.
£900 under their bills this winter with extra support for the most vulnerable, and that is, Mr. Speaker, an example of the United Kingdom and the Union delivering for people in Scotland.
Evidently not.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Eden Project North is...
Again, I just... You continue to ignore Scotland, and by ignoring the SNP, you are in fact ignoring Scotland because it's the SNP who are in power. And they have actually got a more representative voting system. It's not perfect, but it's more representative than ours. Yet, we're saying, no, you can't have a referendum. You're not in power. What gives you the say? Why do you get to say no when the people in power are saying we want to leave? Again, whilst I am on the side of, I'm on the unionist side of that argument, I do not side with the arguments coming across of the court said you can't have the vote, so you're not allowed to vote. No, you need to change the legislation so you can allow Scotland to have the vote if it wants. If it is indeed voluntary, this membership of the United Kingdom, where is the legislation to allow it to leave? And that's coming from someone who believes in Scotland being part of the Union. Anyway, I'm going to skip the rest of PMQs. I'm going to look at the rest of the programme, the Politics Live programme, see what else is said.
The end of this week's Prime Minister's questions. I'm joined, as always, in this half of the programme by the government, represented by Andrew Bowie, the Exports Minister today, by Labour, the Shadow Justice Secretary Steve Reid, hello to you, and the BBC's Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young. We're going to talk about strikes in just a moment, but Vicky, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, focused a number of his questions on the Conservative peer, Baroness Michelle Mone. Give us the background to this story.
Yeah, well, this is all about how personal protective equipment contracts were handed out during COVID. Now, you remember at the time there was an absolute desperate scramble to get hold of this kind of stuff. So what the government did is it set up a VIP lane, a kind of priority process whereby MPs and peers from any party could recommend companies that they knew about who would be able to provide it. Now, in 2020, there was a company called PPE MedPro. They were awarded 2 contracts worth more than £200 million. A published list later revealed that the Conservative peer, Baroness Mohn, was the source of the referral. She named this company and said that they could come up with the goods. And a Cabinet Officer Minister then put it onto this VIP high priority route. Now, she has always denied links to that company. Her lawyers say she had no role or function in PPE MedPro. But The Guardian reported that a trust in which the peer, her and her children were beneficiaries, and it says that they may have received as much as £29 million originating from the company's profits. Now, the House of Lords Commissioner for Standards has launched an inquiry that says he's unable to finalise or publish it because the matter is under investigation by the police or another agency. So that is the background to what's been going on with all of this.
Now, you mentioned The Guardian, this headline, Michelle Mohn, you see they're lobbied for second firm with secret links to husband. What is this about?
Well, this is another claim, as you say there, in The Guardian. Their report saying they've seen documents linking another firm called LFI Logistics with Douglas Barrowman, her husband. We haven't managed to verify those reports. The government has said that the new firm, that firm, didn't get any contracts, and she and her husband have previously denied various claims about their involvement in all of this. But as you can see there, it is absolutely rumbling on.
We have various statements from Baroness Mohn, who rejects the allegations that she benefited personally and financially from the awarding of these contracts, and a spokesman
looking
for her
like
has
showing
said
that she did.
her legal team, are dealing with what they call a witch hunt situation. Rishi Sunak said he was shocked by the allegations and the claims, but not shocked enough, it seems, to have withdrawn the Conservative whip from Michelle Mohn. In fact, it was up to her to take a leave of absence, and then she did lose the whip as a consequence of that. Why wasn't it taken away by Rishi Sunak?
Well, firstly, I share the shock felt by the Prime Minister. I think just about everybody else reading the allegations in the newspapers this morning and in the previous few days.
It's been rumbling on for about 2 weeks, if not longer. And now you're shocked? How slow is your brain?
It's absolutely right that she's taken a leave of absence from the House of Lords. That means she no longer takes the Conservative
take that preemptive move himself?
She now no longer takes the whip. We believe in the premise. Now, these allegations are shocking, but we do believe in the premise of innocent until proven guilty. There's a
I just can't. It just What we have here, by the way, is a Tory, a Scottish Tory, trying to defend Mohn and the Prime Minister, and it's an exercise in humiliation, same as it was for defending Boris Johnson.
Police investigation ongoing. There is going to be an investigation within the House of Lords itself. We should allow those investigations to run its course. But before jumping to conclusions, however, if they are proved correct, these allegations are absolutely shocking, and it's absolutely right that she has stepped back from the House of Lords as the process is seen through.
And if she decides to go back on her leave of absence, let's say in a month's time, but we haven't had the conclusions of these investigations and inquiries, should Rishi Sunak take the whip away again?
I think we get drawn into hypotheticals here. The fact is that she no longer, right now, has a Conservative whip. She is no longer in the House of Lords. She is no longer an active Conservative peer. And I think that we should now let the investigations, the multiple investigations, run their course.
Right. The government has been called on by Labour to publish the documents around how contracts were awarded, and it's committed to do so. When can we expect those documents to be released, and will they be released in full or will they be redacted?
That's a question for the Cabinet Office, who I presume are dealing with this process right now. There was a humble address yesterday. The Labour Party won their motion in front in Parliament, and we are now committed to respond with the papers, and as I said, the Cabinet Office will be seeing the process through as we speak.
Well, I mean, it sounds like there is a proper process underway, Steve. An investigation and an inquiry, and Michelle Mohn has taken a leave of absence herself. She is no longer a Conservative peer. I presume you'll wait for the outcome.
Well, I think you're right to say that she should have had the Conservative whip withdrawn. It's the nature of the allegations, the scale of them. Of course, that should have happened, but the Prime Minister hasn't done it. He keeps showing himself to be weak in many respects. This looks like another one to me. And underpinning that, I mean, does anyone else remember Rishi Sunak when he was competing for the leadership of the Conservative Party, saying that the first thing he would do would be to appoint an ethics advisor? Where is that ethics advisor? He still hasn't appointed somebody. It's got rid of by Boris Johnson, Liz Truss.
That's a damn good point. It was a big thing you made. Oh, I'm going to bring it back. Where is it, mate? 5 days off of the shortest prime ministerial term in history. Where's your ethics advisor, dude?
Never put anybody in, and now we have yet another scandal bubbling under, and there's no ethics advisor to advise the Prime Minister. And
that's still the intention of the Prime Minister to appoint an ethics advisor. He stands by what he said.
Well, he said he'd appoint one, and he hasn't.
Well, he will appoint an ethics advisor. He has only been Prime Minister for 5 weeks, and there's been quite a lot going on in the country in that time.
For a lot of your Prime Ministers.
Yeah, well, not this one. He's going to be in position for a lot longer than that, and he will be appointing an ethics advisor. That remains a commitment from 10 Downing Street, and we look forward to him doing so.
Well, I mean, on this issue, we shouldn't talk about the details of this issue. I'm sure.
No, and actually, because you're Shadow Justice Secretary, I mean, you do believe, I presume, in natural justice and the process taking place.
Well, robust justice, which isn't what we see from this government. And actually, what this is part of is a much bigger picture of breathtaking levels of cronyism, if not corruption, from this government. I'm not referring to this case,
right,
Joe, but in general, the VIP lane. And the way that, cronies, friends of Conservative MPs were able to siphon off £2 billion of public money into the bank.
Steve, I'm just going to sort of correct you in terms of the terminology. Siphon off does make it sound like it's corrupt.
Well,
but hang on, even generally on PPE, I know that's what you believe happened, doesn't mean it did happen.
Steve, Labour MPs and Conservative MPs, we have to remember the context of the times we were living in right there. We had a shortage of PPE across the board. We were doing everything possible within our power to get PPE into the country and on the front line. And Labour MPs, like Conservative MPs, were putting forward suggestions to government for companies in their constituencies that were able to help the situation we were in.
And it was nearly all Conservative MPs, was that the friends and business associates of Tory MPs got themselves put on a VIP lane that gave them 10 times more likelihood of getting a contract than other British firms who had been doing that kind of work for years. And Matt Hancock's pub landlord got given a contract over British businesses that have been producing that kind of PPE for decades.
Let Andrew respond, and then I want to move on.
It is borderline corrupt.
Hang on. We need to retract all this idea of corruption because you don't know. I understand the claims as you are setting them out.
Yeah,
it's borderline corruption. But to say that it is corrupt,
that is my view. I'm sorry about that. It's been said.
Well, it isn't justified, and I think there's an independent.
No, bullshit. No, fuck off. I'm sorry. I've got to push back on Joe Coburn here, right? Whilst in legal terms she might be right, I don't give a fuck. I mean, actually, the courts have turned around and said the way the Tories did this was unlawful. So, yeah, corruption. Borderline corruption. I don't think that's an actually unreasonable thing to say. I'm actually going to push back on the BBC here. Well, actually, I've pushed back on the BBC many times, but I'm going to push back here. Like, no, fuck off.
Process going on right now, looking at the entire situation around the period that we were living through at the time, and we cannot forget the context we were in. The National Health Service.
Oh my God! Again, I'm going to pull up the exact what I said earlier. I'm going to reiterate what I fucking said earlier. You basically did a war games about the possibility of pandemic, a serious pandemic hitting Britain. We needed medical supplies. We needed more beds. We needed more hospitals. We needed to prepare. You didn't do it! So coming up with, we were in this fucking period, the reason it was that difficult is you didn't bother to prepare. Because you were so concentrated on your fucking precious Brexit. Oh! The lies. Does anyone believe this bollocks?
Was crying out for personal protective equipment. We pulled out all the stops. We pulled out all the stops.
You had plenty of time. You had, I think the War Games were done 2017, 2018. You could have at least started on preparing. You didn't bother
to deliver PPE on the front line, and we did that at the same time as delivering the fastest vaccine.
Oftentimes PPE that was inadequate or was just didn't work at all.
In the country and getting this country through the pandemic
as a veil for cronyism.
Well, you can't use the pandemic. You can't use the pandemic as a veil for.
There was some £2 billion
that's
got missing.
I'm going to stop you both there because I want to repeat the statements by Michelle Mone and her legal team. Her spokesman has said the allegations that have been unjustly levelled against her, obviously separate to what you've just been talking about, and that they will deal with what they call this witch hunt situation. Let's move on and talk about the strikes, as I said, was also discussed at PMQs. Talk to Peter Barnes, my colleague in the Political Research Unit. Peter, what did you pick out from today's exchanges in Prime Minister's questions that I can talk to my guests about?
Well, Keir Starmer raised this interesting question about this proposed law, which is called the Transport Strikes Minimum Service Levels Bill, and I'm just looking at it here on the Parliament website. And that is an idea for a law that was first introduced by Liz Truss when she was Prime Minister. And the idea is that if transport workers go on strike, like the train workers, the rail workers currently are, they would still have a legal obligation to provide minimum service levels, even though they were on strike. Now, this bit of law, this proposed law, was introduced to the House of Commons. It was published on October the 20th.
But completely undemocratic. The Tories want us to go back to a point where workers don't get a chance to argue for more if they've been pushed to the brink.
But since then, we've not seen anything else of it. So it's waiting for what's called its second reading, which is when MPs first get an opportunity to debate it. But as I say, it was introduced about 50 days ago, and there's no sign yet of when it's going to come back.
Utterly shambolic. They threaten. You heard Rishi Sunak threatening in PMQs then, and it's just ridiculous because they know it's undemocratic. And I'm sick to death of the Tories trying to put this fucking wedge in of, oh, strikers are against working people. Strikers are part of the population of working people, you fucking dick. You're treating them nurses like they're the villains, you cunt. Fuck off. Seriously. Fuck off.
Parliament. So Keir Starmer was asking Rishi Sunak about that, but he did also say that the new Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, was in front of a committee this morning and said that this legislation wouldn't really help in the current dispute anyway, because it will take too long to get through Parliament. Even once it's gone through its first debate in the House of Commons, there are other stages and it has to get through the House of Lords. But anyway,
and as stated in the time since, Labour's come out and said they would repeal any anti-strike law anyway.
It's an interesting question for your panellists. What has happened to this bill? Is it going to come back anytime soon? Will it help people who are facing strike action, passengers who are struggling on the railways? But a question for your Labour guest as well, for Steve. Does Labour support this bill? Because I think pretty certainly Labour Party is opposed to it. So it'll be interesting to hear what they say.
Peter Barnes, thank you very much. Well, let's pick up on those questions.
If the Labour guy doesn't show he's against this, I'm going to be disappointed.
Andrew, where is this anti-strike legislation that was promised?
Well, firstly, Mark Harper in front of the committee is absolutely right. Unfortunately, due to the time it takes to get legislation through Parliament.
Unfortunately.
The legislation, good as it is, the proposal is...
It's not good at all.
Would not actually help with the situation that we're facing within the next 2 weeks. We simply could not get the legislation through Parliament in time to alleviate the situation that customers, people across the country are facing in the next 2 weeks.
So is it being put on the back burner? Is it going to happen?
That's obviously a decision for the Prime Minister. The legislation has been published. We are determined to enact legislation to reduce the impacts that strikes have on the British public. They were frankly holding the British people to ransom.
Fuck off this line. once again, they are. The people striking are working people who are just like the rest of the public. It's the Tories and their cronies who are different.
A lot of people's Christmases in the process. So, yes, of course, we're going to be bringing forward legislation to deal with this. But the proposed legislation...
When's it going to happen? I mean, we heard the date there, October the 20th. There is now going to be strikes across the board in all sorts of industries. But let's just take the rail strikes, for example. There are at least 8 to 10 strike dates now. As you say, it wouldn't have affected these particular dates. But if you're saying...
Even if we introduced it on proceeded from the 20th of October, very unlikely.
But your claim is that the country's being held to ransom.
Absolutely.
Why isn't it a priority? Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, said it's just not a priority.
It is absolutely a priority.
So, this is the mess the Tories are in. Like, the ideology doesn't make sense, so you can't really expect them in total to make sense anyway. But they're arguing against each other here. And not only that, but he's arguing against what he said right at the beginning of his little monologue. You know, first he says he agrees with Mark Harper, now he's disagreeing with Mark Harper. There's no consistency.
Mark Harper and the Transport Department and the entire government are engaged right now in negotiations to try and alleviate the pain and the misery that's going to be caused by the Labour Party's paymasters over the next few weeks.
Fuck off! The people that pay the workers are you people, you cunt.
On the people of this country. It'd be very interesting.
Or at least
the
the
Labour
public
Party
sector workers,
Conservatives, that legislation is required to prevent these strikes taking place, or to prevent the impact on strikes on the British population.
Steve?
Well, the reason we're facing a winter of discontent.
Yeah, but do you support
we're facing a winter of discontent because for the 12 years the Tories have been in, that has been the worst decade for wage growth since the Great Depression of the 1930s. And now, at the end of all of that, we're seeing inflation running out of control because this government has lost control of the economy, and indeed their kamikaze budget that Liz Truss imposed caused a run on the pound and caused inflation to increase and caused mortgage and interest rates to escalate. So no, but what's happening is people can't make ends meet. I've met nurses working in a hospital in my constituency that go to food banks because they can't afford to get food on the table. What is required from this government isn't draconian legislation to force people who can't pay their bills anymore because this government lost control of their economy.
Too scared to speak up against the union.
The unions aren't the enemy, you fucking cunt! This is the trick here. The way they're talking about, the way he's talking, the Scott dude, the Scottish Tory here, the way he's talking, the way all Tories talk is as if the unions are the bad guys. They're not.
Well, and you're speaking up against nurses who can't afford to feed themselves and their kids.
Speaking up against nurses, we're engaged in discussions with nurses.
What we need, Andrew, is a government that's prepared to govern, sit down, bring to the table the two sides of these many disputes that are happening, and get a negotiated settlement. But as I understand it, neither the Health Secretary nor the Transport Secretary have been prepared to sit down and convene face-to-face discussions between the two sides to get to a resolution. We've got a government that refuses to govern and a cost of living crisis that is putting real financial pain on households, and the Tory response legislates to force them to go to
what we've
work.
What we've got, frankly, is a Labour Party who are willing to bend over backwards to their union paymasters, and at a time...
This is their only response. It's so weak. The Shadow Justice Secretary is correct. He's absolutely correct. And the only response that either Tory has had in this Politics Live show has been unions. We're not in the 80s anymore, bellends. Grow up.
At a time when the RMT are crippling this country, doing huge damage to the...
You are... You have crippled the country. The RMT, ASLEF, and the many others are responding to your bullshittery and your cuntishness. So fuck you. And once again, I don't care about the argument of or you sound less intelligent if you go around swearing. I don't care. I know I'm intelligent. The swearing is me expressing my anger. I don't give a flying fuck what you think, or anyone thinks. These assholes don't know what they're doing. And their only response to logical questions from Labour is, oh, unions. Like we're back in the 70s and 80s again.
The hospitality sector. And by the way, the first normal Christmas they should have had for 3 years due to the pandemic and cancelling people's Christmases.
Yes?
The question was on the transport.
Pandemic, but
this specific question was on the transport strikes and the rail strikes. And the fact is, you're on the side of the unions and not on the side of the British people.
Well, so you wouldn't support anti-strike legislation, further anti-strike legislation
I think
to
the
limit.
government shouldn't put people in the position where they feel they have to strike.
Well, that's not the answer to the question.
Course.
But if the legislation,
No, it is the answer to the fucking question. Actually, shut up, you bitch. Yes, I just called Joe Coburn a bitch. I don't give a flying fuck. It is actually the answer. Don't tell him that's not the answer to that question. It is. That's the answer he gave. Condescending cunt.
Back, would you support it? No.
No, because I don't think people should be forced to go to work.
On the side of the
it is a right.
It was an answer either way. That was condescension.
Before your Labour. It is a right to, Michelle Mona's just withdrawn her Labour from the House of Lords. Would you pass legislation to force her to stay in there?
I think, right, I'm not going to get drawn on that question.
The legislation.
The hypocrisy is insane.
So when is it going to happen? I mean, it keeps being promised. If you think it's going to be a game changer, not for these strikes, but for any future strikes, why don't you make it a priority and present it in January?
It is a priority, and we present it very soon.
So, Joe, I think part of the problem is that there are ministers close to, particularly the talks with the rail unions, who are still optimistic that they can reach a deal. Now, not, as you say, in time to deal with the ones over Christmas, but in the longer term, they do think a deal could be done. And I think there is some concern that this legislation would inflame potentially the situation. Remember, under Liz Truss, there was talk of other legislation bringing in higher thresholds. Now, yesterday they were asked about this at the Westminster lobby, and actually the Prime Minister's official spokesman just saying, well, that's speculative. That does seem to have gone away. But yeah, there's definitely a big question here, but also for Labour about, talking about the amount of money that nurses, if you think they should be paid more, how much more do you think they should be paid?
Well, I mean, there's no prospect, unfortunately, of a general election for at least 2 years, it appears.
No. I don't like. They're going about to challenge here, but Labour don't have the same details the Tories do because they're not in government.
You must have an idea.
You must have a ballpark figure
by then. So something that the Labour Party has put forward. Here's something the Labour Party has put forward. The strike in the NHS isn't just about pay. It's also about the terms and conditions and the burdens and the shortage of nurses that there are. We would scrap non-dom status and use that money to have the biggest expansion of nurses and doctors our NHS has ever seen. We want nurses, not non-doms. That is a sensible way.
Nice line. Gotta admit, nice line. Nurses, not non-doms.
Ease the pressure on nurses today. But your party votes against that.
No, Steve.
And we know why, don't we?
Steve, the independent panel on public sector pay. That is what...
Without challenge. It's right to have an independent pay body because, because of corruption and shit. But there's no challenge. The government is effectively saying here is it accepts what the review body says because it thinks that's enough and is not willing to offer up an argument. They're not willing to say that. I like for that specific argument to be put to the Tories on it. Yeah? Where's the challenge?
determines are offered to the various unions, including within the National Health Service, would you follow their recommendations as well if you were in government? That's the question the Labour
What
Party
needs
has
to
to
happen
ask.
is that the Health Secretary, Stephen Barclay, has not sat down to listen to the
But on that
nurses and to bring
question,
the
but on
employers
that question,
together
Steve,
to make sure that there
would
can
you
be
would you follow? I mean, governments guide and governments can advise in terms of pay increases or not. Would you follow the recommendation of the pay review bodies?
It's certainly something we need to take into account. But the key issue here,
certainly something we need to take into account. It's not treating it like a damn god. That's the thing. You know? There has to be some pushback.
is it comes after a decade of wages held down, a decade of underinvestment in the NHS, and a shortage of nurses relative to the numbers of people.
We keep hearing that the Labour Party is a government in waiting. We keep hearing that the Labour Party is a government in waiting. Instead,
and invest that money in nurses.
We keep hearing the Labour Party is a government in waiting, but on two of the biggest questions facing the country today, do you support the RMT and their strikes?
That's not. Oh, that's not important. This is how the Tories are distracting from their problems. Don't listen to this bollocks.
Through Christmas, would you follow the principles and the advice of the independent peer review bodies? You cannot answer those two questions. Instead, what do we have? We have a 700-page report published by Gordon Brown, supported by Keir Starmer, on constitutional reform and the House of Lords, when we are facing the big...
Yeah, that's just one aspect, you dick. And you're not doing fuck all.
Big issues that are facing the British people right now.
No, you aren't.
We are prepared to take the tough decisions.
Bollocks!
Strikes is because your government lost control of the economy and people need a pay rise because they can't afford to make ends meet. Now, if you want to legislate to force people to go to work when they can't afford to get food and have to go to food banks, nurses,
we
who I
want to
presume
legislate
you, like me,
we want to legislate to protect this country from being held to ransom.
What a fucking cunt. What fucking cunts the Tories are.
By trade unions, which are the Labour Party's paymasters.
There were no
forward.
strikes in the NHS under 13 years of the Labour government. How has it come to this? It's their government that has caused this problem. And the answer to it is not to take punitive draconian action against nurses who can't afford to feed their kids. It's to make sure that we have a health service that works for people and an economy that's growing fast enough to pay people decent wages.
Let me show you.
Not be disingenuous. You know that we're facing global inflationary pressures.
Oh,
you know
this is... the global inflationary pressures could be dealt with a different theology, with a different way of thinking. Because you're not dealing with it, and the Tories can't deal with it.
Reasons that we're in the situation we are in. It's nothing to do with the domestic policies of this government. We are taking action to guide this country
because
through the
Conservatives always say this, but of the 38 countries in the OECD, we have the lowest growth. All of those countries have got those same headwinds across the whole world. What is the unique factor that makes this country fall so far behind?
Brexit.
It is this incompetent Conservative government.
All right, let's have a look.
I suppose again, the Labour Party is having to dodge the Brexit subject at the moment. I don't like it. I don't like it. I will want to establish that. But I do see the pragmatism of it.
This headline in The Independent: more than 40% of British exports have disappeared from European shelves since Brexit. It's based on new research from Aston University. Do you accept, Andrew, that Brexit has made it more difficult for businesses to export to goods and services? You are the Exports Minister.
Yeah, look, our exit from the...
Just the way you had to start.
Single market and customer union has obviously changed the relationship between British exporters
and made it more difficult.
But we are determined to...
by the way, this is Andrew Bowie, or Bowie, further to Tories.
Resolve the situations, to make it easier for British exporters to get their goods onto shelves within the European continent. As each day goes past, companies in this country are finding it easier to get their goods...
I'm sorry, there's a lie. Every time I go down to the shop, there's less on the shelves. There's less and less choice on the shelves. And not just less and less choice, but actually literally less. So once again, lies.
Into Europe, we're determined to make it even easier than it is.
But has
right
it made
now.
it harder? Has Brexit made it harder?
It's changed the relationship. There's no doubt about that.
Has it made it harder? It's changed the relationship. No. Has it made it harder? It's changed the relationship. No. Has it made it harder? It's changed the relationship. It's harder. You made it more difficult. Admit it.
And of course, it takes time.
You lied to everyone. Admit it.
Companies to get to grips with, to understand, and to easily navigate the new rules and the systems that are in place.
You led this country down a fucking rabbit hole. Admit it.
We're in the Department for International Trade committed to actually simplifying the process.
How are you going to make it easier? I mean, because the research also shows a reduction in product varieties being exported to the EU. Isn't that going to...
And that's the same coming back, by the way. Not only that, by the way, but the checks coming in are either not happening or not stringent enough. So bad quality food is being imported into the UK because of Brexit.
Going to hurt businesses if they're producing fewer things because they can't sell them.
Yeah, but we're determined to drive up exports, not just to Europe, but
what you just said literally doesn't make sense.
Around the world. Look
In the
what
context.
We're doing in Australia and New Zealand. Look at the discussions that are going on with the
trade deal that
TPP.
the former DEFRA Minister George Eustace said was a rotten deal, even though he supported Brexit.
Well, you won't be surprised to find that I disagree wholeheartedly.
You're a fucking idiot then. George Eustace was, I think, involved in the making of that deal. And he thinks it's a bad deal. So shut up. Just admit you got it wrong. Please. I mean, they won't, obviously, but
with George Eustace's prognosis or of the deals that we've done with Australia and New Zealand, they're groundbreaking, especially for many areas of the UK economy that are growing. Financial services, just being one of them.
You want to increase exports to the EU from where we are now. How are you going to do it?
Various ways. We're in the beginning of, in the middle of discussions. We've got a target of getting the UK up to £1 trillion of exports. Of course, Europe is a major market for British goods. Sure, they want to buy our stuff, and we're
again. It's like Britain still thinks it's top dog. It's like the UK, the Tories still think we're top dog in the world, or one of the top dogs. We're not. And they just pushed us even further down. It's ridiculous. I just... It's so miserable listening to the Tory talk. Because not only is it depressing, but it's not even true.
Working hard across the board to simplify the process by which British companies get their goods into Europe.
Right, but imagine, I know nothing about this, and actually I don't know anything about how businesses trade. How do you do it?
We're going to simplify the customs process. That's going to...
You can't. You don't control the situation. We aren't the big market. The EU is. The single market. You cannot control the situation. You can't simplify it because you and your party decided that you wanted, that we were going, this guy apparently voted to leave, to remain, sorry. So he's actually being counterintuitive to his own former arguments. But, the Tories led us down this rabbit hole, lying in Britain the entire time. And now they expect us to believe that we can have a say in how trade deals are run in the single market. We don't have any control there. The Tories are this weird delusion that we're the ones with the power. It's utterly delusional.
Engaging with various countries across the European Union, and of course...
It's a single market. Look. Agreements and such with with different EU countries, possibly. Trade agreements? No, you're dealing with a single market, you stupid twat.
making it a simpler process to do all the...
You don't have the control. You don't get to decide that.
Are you hoping to do that individually with countries in the EU rather than doing it with the EU as a whole?
There will be a variety of discussions that are ongoing between the UK and the EU as a whole. And
I could be wrong, but again, you don't have the control on this.
Your country.
Are they receptive to that?
Are
they receptive to that?
Yes, of course they are. They want to buy British stuff. We want to sell them our stuff, and we're going to, and trade's going to go up.
British exceptionalism.
You must embrace this because, of course, Keir Starmer's made a big thing about making Brexit work better than the Conservatives, but you're not going back to rejoining the single market. You're not going back to freedom of movement.
No.
So how would you do it?
No one wants to reopen those divisions. But as Andrew put it, you can't easily navigate a fatberg of bureaucracy at the British borders. And what's happened is hitting smaller and medium-sized companies, the biggest, companies that can't afford to have warehouses in continental Europe. They're finding that it's become nearly impossible for them to export and trade with Europe.
But you're supporting Brexit, so you must think that there's an upside to this.
I've got a textile company, a clothes manufacturer in my constituency that used to do enormous amounts of trades with the European Union, and they've had to stop and lay off staff because of it.
Well, have you got an idea for Andrew to take on? What would Labour do?
What we need to do is look at where we can align standards and reduce the
Don't give the Did you hear her in the background? It's fucking, again, bitch, joker, align standards. That's how it's going to work. You can't... This woman, does this woman know what she's what she's complaining about? Did anyone else here? I'm just going to slightly rewind that, won't I? Listen.
Where we can align standards and reduce
That's how it would work, you stupid twat. It sounds boring, but that's how it would work. Now, unfortunately, Labour is having to take this line on Brexit, and I don't like it at all. But if it gets them in, and they can push us back, start pushing us back towards, closer alignment with Europe, those talks can continue to be had. But I get that it's not gonna. This isn't favourable to those further on the left and those who, never supported Brexit in the first place and see the damage it's doing. But at the the problem is it's done, and many signs from the EU itself. The EU itself doesn't want to go through that mess right now. So, at the very least, closer alignment. And talking about closer alignment is the best we can do. At the moment, that must be specified.
The tariffs and barriers at the border to allow trade to flow more easily. These companies are having to fill in. They showed me one of them.
Deal.
I'm not sure the EU would accept a Swiss-style deal.
Switzerland doesn't like the Swiss-style.
But 30-page forms that you have to fill in for each type of goods that you're going to export. They negotiated this, and we need to get rid of it.
Aligning with EU standards.
It's not about closer alignment. It's about simplifying the process at the...
Right. And this is where I can literally point to a major difference between the Tories and Labour. And you can agree with me or you can disagree with me. To be fucking honest, I don't care. what you've got on one hand is Labour saying we'll try to make Brexit actually work. We'll mitigate. We will try to deal with the problems that the Tories have dealt us. At the same time as trying not to reopen an argument that split families. This thing would have to be taken on, less brusquely. But on one side you've got Labour saying closer alignment, on the other side you've got Tories saying no, we don't want closer alignment with Europe. So you want a political difference. There's a big one there. So stop with the bullshit of, oh, it's just they're just red Tories. There's no such thing.
Border. We're going to digitise the process. This is quite technical, but we have got a process on the way right now, Border 25, whereby we want to...
by the way, the red Tory bullshit, that is actually reactionary bullshit. I used to do the same thing myself. But, again, whilst I'm not a Starmer stooge, I'm a Labour member. And I grew up under a Labour government and a Tory government. I want Labour in charge.
Digitise the entire customs process. That will make it much simpler and much easier for British companies to export to.
I will challenge Labour ministers and the leader when I feel it's necessary. But one of the problems the left, I agree with a point that's made about the left, is that we consistently cannot group together because we can't. We want what we want, and we can't seem to compromise, which is stupid. It's illogical. Enough of it.
But we need buy-in from both sides. It's all well and good.
Well, it sounds like it is buy-in.
It's all well and good for Steve to sit here and say we need a close alignment on standards and all the rest of it. But that's going to take goodwill on both sides. Now we are determined to do what.
You're not. From what I've been hearing, when Labour ministers shadow ministers have been talking to people people their opposites in the EU, that there's some good talks going on. So this again, the Tory talking out of his arse.
But we need to, on our side, we need cooperation and engagement with.
Well, if you look at the Northern Ireland Protocol, veteran standards.
We haven't got time for the Northern Ireland Protocol. We've got 45 seconds. It sounds like these two agree, Vicky, on at least this issue.
Yeah, but that's the interesting thing, isn't it, about this whole discussion about Brexit and the implications. Actually, Labour aren't particularly going on the attack on it because of the reasons we've just heard. So yeah, if they can both come up with some ideas to make it easier, then maybe that's the way forward for Rishi Sunak.
Closer alignment. They did answer. We need to go for close. But the problem with Brexit is there's no clear answer because no one was clear on Brexit on what exactly Brexit was in the first place. That's why everything's been so vague, because Brexit was so vague. That's the end of this. Again, last week's PMQs I'm still trying to upload. I still don't know why I'm having so many problems. I'm not sure if I can get it uploaded. I will continue to try. However, this has been Politics Live and PMQs on from BBC side of things via, and a thank you, Political TV YouTube channel. Having the foresight to upload this kind of thing on a regular basis. Nice one, guys. This has been Shadow Rito. Yes, there's less of the pagan side of things this week, but I do have a couple of videos coming up on that side, on that kind of thing. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, this has been Shadow Rito. Please like and subscribe. Please subscribe. Please comment. I want to. These things need to be talked about. I want debate. I want things to be talked. I don't just want everyone to agree or just disagree. You know, there has to be to and fro on this. So please do subscribe to my channel, become part of the Shadow Wotan, and blessed Thursday, everyone. Blessed Thursday, blessed be. Have a good evening.